The lonely rancher named Daniel had lived far from town for almost 12 years. His ranch was wide, peaceful, and quiet, but the silence around him had grown heavier day by day. He woke up before sunrise, fed his animals, repaired his fences, and worked until dusk. It was a steady life, but not a warm one. He had no family nearby, no visitors, and no one who waited for him at the end of the day. He had grown used to loneliness, but sometimes, when the wind blew across the empty fields, he felt the weight of it pressing on his chest. One warm afternoon, Daniel rode into town for supplies. He needed feed for the horses, nails for repairs, and a few small tools. He did not like staying in town for long because people there were more social than him. They greeted each other loudly, shared stories, and laughed in groups. Daniel usually kept quiet, only nodding when someone spoke to him. He did not dislike people. He just felt out of place among them. He tied his horse outside the feed store and walked inside. The place smelled of hay and leather. As he picked up what he needed, the ground outside shook a little, as if someone strong was walking. The store owner glanced toward the door with a smile. "She's here again," he whispered to Daniel, as if announcing an event. Before Daniel could ask who, the door swung open, and a tall shadow filled the entrance. A giant cowgirl stepped in, taller and broader than any woman Daniel had ever seen. Her shoulders were wide, her arms strong, and she carried 2 heavy feed sacks on each side like they weighed nothing. Dust covered her boots, and her braided hair hung down her back like a thick rope. People in the store went quiet for a moment, as they always did when she entered. She was not just tall. She carried herself with confidence, as if she feared nothing in the world. Her name, as Daniel later learned, was Clara. Some people admired her, some feared her, and others simply did not know how to talk to her. But no one ignored her. She had a presence too strong for that. Daniel turned to look, not out of rudeness, but out of genuine surprise. He had never seen someone like her. She was powerful, steady, and sure of herself. Yet there was something soft in her expression, something human, that the others seemed to miss. He observed the way she set the sacks down without slamming them, the way she greeted the store owner kindly, and the way she checked her horse through the window as if she truly cared for it. Clara noticed Daniel staring. Most men stared at her with fear or challenge. Some tried to act tough. Others avoided her eyes. But Daniel's stare was different, quiet, confused, respectful, and completely honest. She studied him for a moment, then walked toward him with long, confident strides. "Stop staring," she said in a bold tone, though not angry. Then, she added, with a teasing smirk, "If you wish, touch it." Daniel froze. His face turned red. His mind struggled to make sense of what she meant. Clara noticed his panic and burst into laughter, loud, warm, and full of amusement. "I meant the horse outside," she said, still laughing. "He's a wild one today. Keeps swinging his head around. I was just joking with you." Daniel looked toward the horse tied outside. It was restless, pulling the rope, stomping its hooves as if unhappy. He exhaled slowly, now understanding her words. I wasn't staring like that," he tried to explain awkwardly. "I know," she replied with a grin. "But you looked so serious. I had to say something." He tried to smile back, though he wasn't used to playful talk. Before he could say more, Clara's horse suddenly neighed loudly and reared up, almost breaking free. Without thinking, Daniel hurried outside. He moved calmly, gently placing a hand on the horse's neck. He whispered to it softly, his touch steady and sure. The horse slowly relaxed under his hands, lowering its head and breathing easier. Clara stood behind him, stunned. She had seen strong men try to control her horse and fail. She had seen brave cowboys step aside in fear. But Daniel, A quiet man with no loud voice or large muscles had calmed the horse with simple patience. "How did you do that?" she asked, genuinely impressed. Daniel shrugged slightly. "I guess I understand animals better than people." Clara watched him closely. For the first time, she felt curious about someone. Not because of fear or admiration, but because of the calmness he carried. Most people tried to show off around her. This man was simply being himself. She leaned against the wooden post, crossing her arms. "What's your name, rancher?" "Daniel. I'm Clara. You probably heard about me." Daniel shook his head. "I don't spend much time in town." Her eyebrows raised. "That explains why you're not scared." "I don't think there's anything to be scared of," he said honestly. That answer made her stare at him longer than she expected. Most people reacted to her size first, her strength second, and her personality third, if they ever noticed it at all. Daniel looked at her like she was simply another person standing in front of him. She did not know how to respond to that feeling, because she had never felt it before. The horse nudged Daniel's shoulder, now calm and trusting. Clara shook her head, amazed. "Looks like he likes you more than me," she joked. "Animals choose who they trust," Daniel replied softly. She opened her mouth to say something else. But before she could, the store owner called her name for pickup. She grabbed the supplies with ease and threw them onto her horse. Daniel stepped back, giving her space. Before mounting, she looked at him again. This time, her expression held no teasing, only interest. "You live far from town, don't you?" He nodded. "About 12 miles west. Maybe I'll ride that way sometime," she said casually, though her voice carried meaning. Daniel didn't know what to say. He had lived alone for so long that he had forgotten how to respond when someone showed interest in him. Clara noticed his hesitation, but did not push further. She placed her boot in the stirrup and swung up onto her horse with smooth strength. Before leaving, she gave him a small smile, gentler than anyone would expect from someone so strong. "See you around, Daniel." Then she rode off, dust rising behind her. Daniel stood there for a while, watching her disappear down the road. He felt something strange inside him. Something warm. Something new. Something he had not felt in many years. It was not love, not yet, but a spark of curiosity, and maybe even hope. Inside the store, people started whispering. Clara talked to someone. She laughed at something he said. She never does that. Daniel ignored them. He picked up his supplies and rode home. But the whole way back, Clara's voice echoed in his mind. Her strength, her presence, her laughter, it stayed with him. He did not know it yet, but the small moment in the feed store was the beginning of something that would change both of their lives forever. Part 2. Daniel woke early the next morning, as he always did. The sky was just beginning to turn pink behind the hills, and a cool breeze brushed across the ranch. He fed the horses, checked the chickens, and fixed a loose board in the barn wall. Every now and then, he found himself thinking about Clara, the giant cowgirl, with the strong voice, strong hands, and strange mixture of confidence and softness. He didn't expect to see her again so soon. She seemed like the type who traveled a lot, moving from job to job, trail to trail. People like her did not wander toward quiet men like him. At least, that's what Daniel believed. Around noon, he heard hoofbeats approaching from the long dirt road that led to his property. He wiped his hands on his pants and stepped outside. The sun was bright, and dust rose in the distance. Slowly, a tall figure on horseback became clear. He recognized the silhouette instantly. Clara. She rode confidently, her braid swinging behind her. When she reached the gate, she dismounted smoothly and gave him a small smile. "Thought I'd drop by," she said lightly. Daniel nodded. He didn't know whether to act surprised or pretend this was normal. Before he could decide, Clara walked closer. "I want to learn how you calmed my horse yesterday," she said. "I've never seen anyone do that." Daniel looked at her horse. It was calmer than yesterday, but still a little stubborn. He walked toward it slowly, letting the animal sniff his hand. It relaxed quickly, just like before. Clara watched with wide eyes. "You make it look easy." "It's not about strength," Daniel said. "It's about patience." She thought about his words and nodded slowly. The idea seemed strange to her. All her life, people expected her to use strength first. She was big, so they assumed she should solve every problem by force. But Daniel was smaller, quieter, and yet more in control of her horse than she ever managed to be. He invited her to bring the horse inside the corral. She followed, a little awkward at first, as if she did not want to step wrong in his quiet world. Daniel never hurried. He explained gently, showing her how to stand, how to breathe, how to watch the horse's movements before reacting. Clara tried to follow every instruction. She wasn't used to slow work. She wasn't used to gentleness either. She fumbled at times, and the horse shied away once or twice. But Daniel calmly guided her through it, never judging, never raising his voice. After an hour, they both rested on the fence. Clara exhaled deeply. "That was harder than lifting 10 sacks of feed," she said. Daniel smiled faintly. "Strength helps, but sometimes animals just need someone calm." She looked at him sideways. "You're calmer than most men I met." "And you're stronger than most men I met," he replied. Clara blinked in surprise, not expecting the compliment. Her cheeks warmed slightly, but she hid it by adjusting her hat. She glanced around the ranch. The land stretched far, peaceful and simple. She could hear the soft sounds of animals, the wind touching the grass, and the creak of the old barn door. Everything felt gentle here, nothing like the noisy towns she worked in. "You live all alone out here?" she finally asked. Daniel nodded. "It's been that way for a long time." "No family?" "No." She studied him carefully. He looked strong in his own quiet way, but his loneliness was clear. It hung around him like a shadow, though he tried to hide it. And the more she watched him, the more she realized how empty his life must be. Everything here was clean, well-managed, and peaceful, but it lacked something human. Clara leaned her elbows on the fence. "Don't you get tired of silence?" Daniel paused. "Sometimes." "What do you do when you feel lonely?" "I work," he said simply. "It keeps my mind busy." Clara thought about that for a moment. She knew the feeling of loneliness well, though most people never guessed it. People saw her size, her strength, her bold voice, and thought she must feel powerful all the time. But inside, she often felt like she lived outside everyone's world. Too different to fit in, too strong to be seen gently, too tall to be approached without hesitation. She looked at her large hands and sighed. "People don't talk to me much," she admitted. "Either they act scared, or they try to impress me. It gets tiring." Daniel listened quietly. He didn't interrupt. His stillness made it easier for her to speak. "Yesterday," Clara continued, "you looked at me different. You didn't stare like others. You didn't step back or act tough. You just looked surprised, but not scared." Daniel didn't know how to respond. He wasn't used to people sharing their feelings with him, especially someone like Clara, who seemed fearless. He looked down at the ground, gathering his thoughts. "I wasn't scared," he finally said. "I just wasn't expecting someone like you to walk in." She raised an eyebrow. "Someone like me? Someone strong, someone confident, someone who seemed sure of every step." Clara laughed softly, but her laugh didn't hide the truth. "I'm not as sure as I look." Before Daniel could ask what she meant, her horse snorted sharply, reminding them both of its presence. She patted its neck gently. After another short practice session with the horse, Clara suddenly hissed in pain. She looked down at her hand. A small cut had opened on her palm from the rope burn. It wasn't serious, but it stung sharply. Daniel noticed instantly. "You should rest that hand." "Ah, ah." Clara tried to shrug it off. "It's nothing. It's nothing." But Daniel didn't listen. He walked to a small wooden bench on the porch and gestured for her to sit. She hesitated, then slowly followed him. Sitting on the bench felt strange for her. It seemed too small for someone her size, and she felt out of place. But Daniel brought a clean cloth and some water, gently cleaning the cut. Clara watched him work. His hands were rough from years of ranch labor, yet he handled her injury with surprising care. His touch wasn't shaky or nervous. It was steady and warm. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "I know," he replied softly. "But you shouldn't work with an open wound." Clara looked at him for a long moment. No one had cared about a small injury on her hand in years. People always assumed she was too strong to need help. "You're different," she finally said. "So are you," he answered. The wind blew softly across the porch. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It wasn't uncomfortable silence. It was peaceful, like both of them understood something unspoken. Clara took a deep breath. "Daniel, I know this might sound strange, but being here feels quiet, in a good way. My life is full of noise, people shouting, horses kicking, trouble everywhere. But your ranch feels calm. You can come by any time," Daniel said before he even realized what he was offering. Clara blinked in surprise. No one invited her anywhere like that. Not without expecting something in return. Not without fear or hesitation. She smiled, soft and genuine. "Maybe I will." As the day grew late, Clara stood and stretched. She towered over the porch railing, almost touching the roof with her hat. Daniel walked her to her horse. She mounted slowly, careful with her injured hand. Before leaving, she looked down at him. "Daniel, thank you for the lessons, for the help, for everything." He nodded. But inside, his heart felt warmer than it had in years. Clara turned her horse toward the road. But before she reached the gate, she looked back one last time and gave him a small, soft smile. Daniel watched her ride away, dust curling behind her. He stood there long after she disappeared over the hill. He did not know what the next day would bring. But he knew one thing clearly. For the first time in many years, he wasn't alone in his world anymore. Someone strong, brave, and unexpectedly gentle had stepped into it. And she might return. The next day began quietly on Daniel's ranch. A mild wind carried the smell of fresh grass across the fields, and the sun rose softly behind the hills. Everything looked peaceful, almost sleepy. Daniel repaired a section of fence along the chicken yard and cleaned out the horse stalls. He tried to focus on work, but his mind kept drifting toward Clara. He wondered if she would return, or if yesterday had been a one-time visit. By afternoon, the sky started turning gray. Clouds gathered quickly, darker than usual, signaling rain. Daniel looked up with concern. Storms could be dangerous in this area, winds strong enough to shake barns, rain heavy enough to flood small paths. He rushed to secure loose items, tied the shed doors, and made sure the horses were safe in their stalls. As he worked, he heard something unexpected. The sound of hooves approaching fast. He turned toward the road. Through the rising dust and the darkening sky, he saw Clara riding hard toward him. Her horse was covered in sweat, and her braid flew wildly behind her. Daniel hurried to the gate just as she arrived. "You shouldn't be out in this weather," he said. Clara breathed heavily, swinging down from her horse. "The storm caught up with me on the trail. I couldn't make it back to town." Daniel looked at the sky again. Rain clouds were already overhead. "You should stay here until it passes." Clara didn't argue. She trusted his judgment, and deep down, she was relieved he said it. She followed him toward the house, while her horse rested near the barn. The first raindrops fell just as they reached the porch. Within minutes, the light rain turned into a heavy storm. Thunder rumbled across the sky, and the wind whistled through the trees. Daniel opened the door for her. Clara stepped inside, ducking slightly so she wouldn't hit her head on the top of the frame. She looked around the place. It was small, simple, and quiet, just like Daniel. A wooden table, a few chairs, a stone fireplace, and shelves lined with old tools and books. He apologized quietly. "It's not fancy." Clara looked at him with a soft smile. "Fancy doesn't matter. It feels warm." Daniel nodded, feeling strangely flustered. He wasn't used to guests, especially not someone like Clara. As the storm howled outside, they sat at the table. Daniel made warm tea from herbs he grew near the porch. Clara wrapped both hands around the mug, enjoying the heat. "This storm is stronger than I expected," she said, listening to the thunder. "It'll pass by morning," Daniel replied. "But for tonight, it's safer to stay indoors." She took a slow sip of tea. "I'm not scared of storms, but getting caught alone out there didn't feel right." Daniel glanced at her. "Everyone needs shelter sometimes." His simple words carried weight. Clara felt them deeply. For so long, she had been the one offering strength, not receiving comfort. Being inside his small home felt strangely safe. Lightning flashed outside, followed by a loud crack of thunder. The windows shook. Clara looked toward them, then back at Daniel. "You stay here alone during storms like this?" she asked. "Yes," he said calmly. "I've gotten used to it." Clara lowered her eyes. "I don't like the thought of you being alone." Daniel wasn't sure how to reply. He cleared his throat and stood up to check the fire. As he added wood, the warm glow filled the room. After a while, the wind grew louder. A sharp howl echoed from outside. Daniel recognized the sound instantly: coyotes. They roamed the area often, but storms made them restless. "We should check the animals," he said. Clara stood up quickly. "Let's go." Daniel grabbed 2 lanterns, handing one to her. They stepped out into the storm. The wind was cold and strong, slapping rain across their faces. Thunder roared over their heads. They ran toward the barn, boots splashing through mud. The coyotes were close, their howls cutting through the storm. The horses inside the barn stomped nervously. Daniel pushed the door open, while Clara held the lantern high. The animals were frightened. A few tried to push against their stall doors. One horse kicked the wall in panic. Daniel moved quickly, whispering gently, calming each one. Clara helped by blocking drafts and soothing one of the young colts. Even with her size, she handled the small animal with surprising tenderness. But outside, the coyotes drew nearer. Their shadows moved past the barn windows. The sound of rain made it harder to tell where they were. Daniel took a breath. "I need to check outside." "I'm coming with you," Clara said, without hesitation. Daniel didn't argue. He knew she was brave, and he needed the help. They stepped back into the storm. The night was darker now, clouds covering the moon completely. The lanterns flickered in the rough wind. They walked around the barn, checking for openings. That's when they heard it scratching near the chicken yard. Daniel rushed ahead. Clara followed, careful in the slippery mud. When they reached the fence, they saw the coyotes, 5 of them, trying to break through the wire. Daniel shouted to scare them off, but the storm washed out his voice. The coyotes didn't budge. Clara picked up a long branch and waved it above her head. Her tall figure and loud shout echoed stronger than Daniel's. The coyotes backed away slightly, unsure. Then another thunderclap frightened them, and they finally ran off into the fields. Daniel exhaled in relief. "You scared them off." Clara wiped rain from her face. "They shouldn't come back tonight." But as she turned, Her foot slipped in the mud. She fell sideways. But before she hit the ground, Daniel reached out and grabbed her arm. She was heavier than he expected, and the sudden pull nearly made him fall too. Somehow he stayed upright and helped her stand. Clara looked at him in surprise. "You caught me?" Daniel shrugged shyly. "I didn't want you getting hurt." She smiled, touched by his concern. "You're stronger than you look. And you're heavier than you look," he joked lightly, surprising both of them. Clara burst into warm laughter, even in the middle of the storm. Together, they checked the fence one last time and then hurried back to the house. They removed their wet boots at the door and stepped inside, cold and shivering. Daniel handed her a towel, and she thanked him softly. He lit the fire again, and soon the room grew warm. Clara sat close to the fireplace, drying her braid and her wet sleeves. Daniel sat beside her, not too close, but not far either. For a while, they watched the fire dance. The storm outside seemed distant compared to the warmth inside. "You didn't have to come with me into the storm," Daniel said quietly. Clara looked at him with gentle eyes. "I wanted to. You help me. I help you." "That's not how most people think," Daniel murmured. "Maybe most people don't know how to care properly," Clara replied. They fell silent again, but this silence was full of understanding, not distance. Clara leaned her back against the wall, stretching her long legs out toward the fire. She looked around his house again. "You really live quietly," she said. "I always thought quiet was easier," Daniel admitted. "But sometimes it feels empty." Clara nodded. "I know that feeling." She looked down at her hands, remembering how people treated her. Strong, yes. Brave, yes. But also alone, misunderstood, ignored, in ways that weren't loud but still painful. Daniel watched her for a moment. "Clara, you don't seem empty. You seem full of strength." She smiled sadly. "Strength isn't the same as happiness." Daniel understood her words more than she realized. As the storm began to fade, Clara rested her head back against the wall and closed her eyes. She wasn't asleep, but she was peaceful, comfortable in his presence. Daniel looked at her quietly. Seeing her here strong, brave, yet tired made something tighten gently in his chest. She opened her eyes and caught him looking. Instead of teasing him, she gave him a soft smile. "Daniel, I feel safe here." He felt his breath stop for a moment. "You're welcome here," he said. She nodded slowly. "Maybe I'll come more often." He didn't answer, but the warmth in his eyes said enough. Outside, the storm finally faded. Inside, something new had begun between them. Quiet, strong, and full of promise. Morning came slowly after the long stormy night. A soft, golden light touched the ranch house, slipping through the small windows and warming the wooden floor. Birds began singing outside, and the smell of wet earth filled the air. Daniel woke early, as he always did, but today, he woke with a strange sense of warmth inside him. It wasn't from the fire. It was from knowing Clara was still in the next room. He stepped quietly into the main room. Clara was already awake, standing near the window. Her tall figure filled the small space, and the light from outside created a soft outline around her. She looked calm, almost peaceful, as she watched the fields that were still shining with morning dew. "You're up early," Daniel said softly. She turned with a smile. "Old habits. I wake with the sun." Daniel nodded. "Storm's gone." "Yes," she said, looking back at the window. "It was a rough night. But I'm glad I wasn't out there alone." Daniel felt something warm settle in his chest at her words. "I'm glad you stayed." Clara glanced at him, then looked away quickly, as if the feeling between them was too strong to face in the quiet morning light. He made simple breakfast, warm bread, fresh eggs, and tea. Clara sat at the table, ducking slightly so she didn't bump her head on the hanging lamp. She looked almost shy in his small kitchen, something that made Daniel smile inside. It wasn't often she seemed shy. She was usually full of confidence and boldness. But here, in his quiet home, she looked softer. "Thank you," she said, after taking a bite. "I'm not used to someone cooking for me." Daniel shrugged. "It's nothing fancy. It's more than I'm used to," she replied honestly. After breakfast, Clara helped him check the ranch for storm damage. They walked together through the damp grass. The sky was bright blue now, completely clear, as if the storm had never existed. But the broken branches, the muddy paths, and the scattered debris told the real story. They started with the barn, fixing loose boards and checking on the horses. Daniel noticed how gently Clara touched the animals. Even though her hands were large and strong, her movements were slow and careful. The horses responded to her easily. "You're good with them," Daniel said. Clara smiled with a hint of pride. "Animals don't judge. They just feel." Daniel nodded. People could learn from them. She looked at him thoughtfully. People have trouble seeing what's inside. They look at size, voice, shape, or strength. They miss the heart. Daniel felt her words deeply. She wasn't just talking about herself, she was talking about him too. His quiet nature made people overlook him. Her size made people misunderstand her. In different ways, they both lived on the edges of other people's attention. They worked for hours, fixing a fence here, clearing branches there. They talked about small things, horses, weather, ranch work. But under the simple words, something else was growing. A slow trust, a gentle comfort. By noon, the ranch looked peaceful again. Clara wiped sweat from her forehead and sighed. "You really keep this place alive on your own?" "I try," Daniel said. "But some days it's hard." Clara studied him. "You don't have anyone to help you?" "No," he said quietly. "Not for a long time." She took a deep breath, as if debating whether to say something important. Then she spoke gently. "You don't have to do everything alone." Daniel looked at her, unsure what she meant. Clara turned away for a moment, gathering courage. "Daniel, yesterday, in the storm, I realized something. I felt safe here. Safe in a way I haven't felt in years." Daniel felt his heartbeat shift. "I'm glad you felt that." Clara faced him again, her voice calmer. "When I rode away after the first day we met, I kept thinking about you. I didn't expect to, but I did. You look at me differently. You talk to me differently. You see me differently." Daniel swallowed, unable to look away from her. "I've been alone for a long time," Clara continued. "People don't understand me. They don't try. They just look at my size and make decisions without knowing my heart." Daniel stepped closer without even thinking. "Your heart is easy to see if someone actually looks." Clara let out a soft breath. "Most don't look, Daniel. But I do," he said quietly. The words hung in the air between them, gentle, honest, and strong. Clara felt something warm spread through her chest. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not with fear, not with judgment, not with expectation. Just truth. They walked back toward the porch. The sun was high now, shining warmly on everything. When they reached the steps, Clara hesitated, then spoke again. "Daniel, you helped me yesterday. You helped me with my horse. You helped me with the storm. And you helped me feel not alone." Daniel looked at her carefully. He sensed she was building up to something important. She took a slow breath. "I want to come back here. Not only for horse training. Not only for shelter. I want to come because I feel something here. Something I don't feel anywhere else." Daniel's voice was gentle. "You're welcome here anytime." Clara shook her head softly. "Not just welcome. I mean, I want this place to be part of my life. I want you to be part of my life." Daniel's heart thumped loudly in his chest. He had dreamed of companionship, but never believed it would happen. And now, This strong, brave woman, the one who could command a room with a single look, was standing on his porch, asking to be part of his world. He took a deep breath. "Clara, I want that too." She looked up, searching his face to make sure he meant it. "I thought you might say that," she whispered with a small smile. They stood in silence for a moment. The breeze lifted the ends of Clara's braid. Daniel felt as if the world had finally stopped turning long enough for him to catch up. Clara sat on the porch steps, stretching her legs out. Daniel sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "So," Clara said softly, "what happens now?" Daniel thought for a moment. "We take it slow. Step by step. You come visit. I help with your horses. You help with the ranch. We see where life takes us." Clara liked the simplicity of his answer. "I can do that." They spent the afternoon fixing a few more damaged areas on the ranch. They laughed more now. They talked about childhood memories, about dreams they never said out loud before. The distance between them, once wide and silent, now felt warm and close. As evening approached, Clara prepared to leave. Her horse was rested, and the sky was clear. She stood beside Daniel, looking down at him gently. "I'll be back in 2 days," she said. Daniel nodded with a quiet smile. "I'll be here." She mounted her horse, but before she rode away, she leaned forward slightly. "Daniel, thank you. For everything." He looked up at her, the sunlight catching her eyes. "Thank you for coming here." Clara turned her horse and rode down the long path. But this time, Daniel didn't watch with sadness or emptiness. He watched with hope. He knew she would return. He knew something new had begun. As the dust settled behind her and the sun dipped low, Daniel whispered to himself, "Not alone anymore." The ranch felt different now, warmer, brighter, full of quiet promise. And somewhere down the road, Clara felt the same. She rode with a lighter heart, knowing she finally found a place where she was seen, understood, and welcomed. Their story didn't end that day. It only began 2 lonely lives slowly joining into one peaceful, strong future.